walked over with her sword in arms, her expression somewhat sullen. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. "What? Did someone upset you?" Li Hao teased. Bian Rushu clenched her teeth slightly, turned her little face away, and did not speak. Li Hao had asked casually, but seeing her reaction, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Tell me what happened." "It's nothing." Bian Rushu got up, hugged her sword, and ran off, heading to the place where she usually practiced her swordsmanship. Li Hao thought for a moment, then summoned the female attendant who accompanied her in sword practice and asked, "What happened to Xuer?" To report to the young master, Miss Xuer was defeated in a swordsmanship contest at the martial arts training ground. Despite Li Fu being present, the attendant still maintained a respectful demeanor, even though she knew that this young master was unfit for martial arts. Just that little thing? Li Hao was relieved and said, "So what if she lost once?" As a martial artist, winning and losing are common in the military profession. She'll just have to win next time. What, can't she accept losing? The attendant hesitated, then said, lowering her head, "No, young master. The one who defeated the young lady was rather despicable, running down the young master in front of her, which is why the young lady is so upset." Ah? Li Hao hadn't expected the issue involved himself. Was the little one taking up his cause? Li Hao glanced at the young girl in the distance, who was now practicing her swordsmanship, but looking visibly agitated. His eyes flickered slightly, and he told the attendant, "I understand. You may go now." After the maid had left, Li Hao did not continue playing chess, but stood up and walked over to the courtyard. Li Fu also stood up. When Li Hao did not speak to him, he reverted to his expressionless military demeanor, like a silent shadow, faithfully following behind Li Hao. Li Fu had asked the servants about the previous assassination attempt, had learned the details thoroughly, and felt a trace of fear. Especially these days of accompanying the child and playing chess, he was keenly aware that the position he was now sitting in was precisely where the assassin had been, separated by only a chessboard. At such a distance, to exploit a child's full array of openings at a moment of inattention could mean death in an instant. But such an assassination had been stopped. It was uncertain whether to call the assassin incompetent or the clan elder who intervened terrifyingly formidable, or perhaps the child was truly blessed with a large fortune. Therefore, Li Fu took it as a lesson, clinging closely to Li Hao's side during meals, drinks, and sleep, scrutinizing any house servant or maid who approached within 3 feet of Li Hao with a hawk-like gaze. This caused the servants and maids in the courtyard to secretly groan. Every time they reported something to the young master, they did so with trepidation. Scarcely daring to lift their heads, they were nearly becoming introverted. Seeing Li Hao approaching, Bian Rushe slightly pursed her lips and turned her body away as if she did not want Li Hao to see her. Li Hao looked at her aggrieved demeanor and smiled warmly, ordering a servant to bring over a small stool and some cakes and fresh fruits, then sat down beside her and began to eat. Practicing swordsmanship with a distracted mind, you can't beat anyone like this, Li Hao said with a smiling tone upon seeing the girl waving her sword chaotically, clearly distracted. Bian Rushue's eyes suddenly reddened a bit, and she stopped practicing. Looking down, she said, "If only Brother Hao could cultivate with your intelligence, you would definitely surpass me in swordsmanship and become the most outstanding one." Having trained in the martial arts field for a year, Bian Rushu had improved rapidly. And as she grew up, her understanding deepened. She began to comprehend why, after the bone measurement, the adults looked at Li Hao with that kind of expression. And she also understood what Li Hao had truly lost in that year. Hearing Xuer's words, Li Fu's brows furrowed slightly. A hidden sorrow and pity briefly showed in his emotionless eyes. This was not only a regret for the Li family, but also for the Divine General Mansion. Li Hao felt a bit helpless. He had not grieved for himself, yet the young girl seemed sadder in comparison. "Don't say that," he consoled. Li Hao comforted her. "Practicing swordsmanship is so boring. Look at you, bearing wind and sun every day, enduring the hardest days of winter and summer. How tiring that must be. Unlike me, eating chilled melon in the pavilion during summer, playing chess, and in winter, curling up in bed to stay warm, sleeping until the sun is high in the sky. Now that's what I call happiness. Emma." Li Fu couldn't help but glance at the boy. These indeed sounded like his kind of words. Without the Divine General around, the other ladies of the mansion could not discipline him too severely, and Li Fu had realized upon his return that the child had adopted a somewhat cynical outlook on life. You're not afraid of hardship, Bianruche said, lifting her head. What do you know? Li Hao responded with annoyance. Look at me now, too lazy even to stand when I can sit, and to sit when I can lie down. Some hardships are meaningless. Otherwise, why would we have sweets? You're still young, you don't understand, just focus on your sword practice. Don't talk nonsense. Li Fu couldn't listen anymore and interrupted sternly. What kind of absurd talk was this? That enduring hardship was meaningless. Which soldier at the border was not enduring hardships? As a martial artist, the last thing to fear is hardship. The only fears were lack of talent and resources. This young master, comfortably unaware of his own blessings, lacked talent yet loathed hardship, not taking his own learning seriously, and now he was potentially leading astray. The young Shuer, how could this be tolerated? Bianruche's talent in the way of the sword was something Li Fu acknowledged. She was exceptionally talented and destined to achieve greatness in swordplay. In the future, she would become a protective umbrella for Li Hao, and he could not let this mischievous young master undermine his future ally. Fu, I think Hao is right. Bianruche hastily spoke up for Li Hao. Li Fu's eyes bulged with frustration. The young girl was too influenced by Li Hao's words. If she truly got led astray by him, it would be disastrous. Don't spill such nonsense to Shuer. You think just because I wouldn't dare beat you? If I did, even your father would approve. Li Fu controlled his impulse to scold the well-behaved orphan girl and instead threatened Li Hao sternly. Li Hao gave a sheepish smile, knowing well that he found no common ground in this respect with the stern and rigid servant. And besides, the Divine General Mansion was a family of soldiers. The Li family had always advocated frugality and the spirit of enduring hardship. Despite the fact that the ladies of various houses dined and dressed sumptuously, envied by all, in accordance with the standing and the foundation of the Divine General Mansion, they could actually live even more lavishly. The great lady, He's online for many years eating vegetarian meals twice a week. Although not Buddhist, as a soldier who had taken countless lives, she did not say she did it for religious reasons, but rather to remind herself and her children not to get lost in this opulent luxury and forget the duty and spirit of a soldier. Yes, you're right, Fu, Liao agreed. To Shuer, he said, see, you made Fu angry. You should hurry up and practice your swordplay. Shuer blinked her small eyes and pouted slightly. It was clearly Hao who provoked the anger. However, she did not argue. If she could take Fu's anger on behalf of Hao, she was willing to do so. Hearing Liao's shameless remarks, Li Fu was about to laugh in exasperation, rolling his eyes. This boy was indeed too difficult to discipline. Fu, can you help take a look and give some pointers to Shuer's swordsmanship? Li Hao asked Li Fu. Li Fu said indifferently, I use a knife, not a sword. The knife and sword are similar. The difference is not significant, Liao said with a smile. What do you know? To train a weapon to perfection, even the slightest difference can lead to infinite variations, Li Fu said irritably, but then restrained his temper, thinking that it was only natural for this kid, who did not understand martial arts, to see it that way. Li Hao felt a bit helpless and continued to munch on fresh fruits, with one leg casually crossed over the other, watching Shuer practice swordsmanship. There's something wrong with your swirling style, he commented. Halfway through watching, Li Hao casually offered Bianruche some tips. If you drop your arm a bit lower, it would look better. Don't talk nonsense, you're going to distract Shuer, Li Fu scolded, frowning. An amateur advising an expert? This would be preposterous. However, Bianruche ignored Li Fu. She was used to Li Hao's casual suggestions. Even though Hao had embarked on the path of martial arts, she found that practicing, as he suggested, always felt smoother. At that moment, as she lowered her arm and used the swirling style again, she indeed felt an understanding and ease in her heart. Li Fu uttered a light, huh, not because Bianruche actually followed Li Hao's advice. After all, the young lady was too compliant with Li Hao because, as Li Hao said, a slight change in posture indeed added a bit more fierceness to the sword's momentum. He glanced down at the kid who was munching on fruit and sitting with his legs recklessly crossed. Was it a fluke? Or was he judging by what looked good? You need to use force in your waist. For a swirling style with a long slash, it's not just the hands that need force. The waist must drive the arms to swing out, Li Hao suggested again. Bianruche nodded slightly, then executed the move several times in a row, finally grasping the essence of it. The sword's momentum created a breeze, and its power was visibly greater than before. Li Fu raised his eyebrows in astonishment. One time could be a coincidence, but not twice. But this kid actually understands swordsmanship and possesses talent for it. Although Li Fu was not fond of Li Hao's disposition, he had to admit that over the past half year, this kid had shown great intelligence, as well as maturity and wisdom beyond his peers. Could be that he actually had talent for swordsmanship, but couldn't display it because he was forbidden to practice martial arts. Thinking about this possibility, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. If that were true, what a regret it would be. With Li Hao's casual tips, Bianruche's sword technique gradually approached perfection. There was no helping it. With Li Hao's understanding of swordsmanship, just by watching for a few moments, he could integrate Bianruche's superior sword technique into his panel and directly achieve a level of near perfection. With his perfect level understanding to compensate for any flaws, he even skipped the perfect stage. As long as Beyond Wuxia grasped a bit of it, she could achieve a might comparable to perfection. Next, Li Hao asked the young lady to perform for him the move she had failed to counter during their previous sparring. Beyond Wuxia obediently complied. Li Hao understood immediately upon watching and even imagined the scene of how his opponent had defeated him. However, he kept it to himself, considering that Li Fu was there. It wouldn't matter, he showed a little bit of understanding of swordsmanship, but getting too detailed would be too freakish. This sword move isn't good looking. I think the downward slash here should be changed to a sloping chop, and the elbow should be lifted behind, he said. It's better to switch from chopping to a straight thrust here, and don't shake your wrist, he pointed out casually. Beyond Wuxia was puzzled, but listened carefully, slowly comprehending Li Hao's words, and then practiced again according to his suggestion. After several repetitions, she gradually came close to what Li Hao had described. Li Fu glanced at Li Hao, and was now convinced that Li Hao also possessed an extremely high talent for swordsmanship. Although the kid expressed himself in an amateurish way, merely correcting Beyond Wuxia's form by what looks good and doesn't look good, being able to perceive the aesthetic of weaponry at such a young age was a talent in itself. After all, in the eyes of a genius, some things appear as a different landscape. Li Fu sighed inwardly, feeling increasingly sorry for Li Hao. The next day, the two went to the Eternal Spring Court for their morning visit, and afterwards, Beyond Wuxia hurried excitedly to the martial training ground. After the morning training and lessons at the martial training ground had ended, Beyond Wuxia found the young man from the previous day, the one born out of wedlock. Clutching a sword nearly as tall as herself, her little face brimmed with seriousness as she requested another challenge. While hearing Beyond Wuxia's words, the young man couldn't help but burst into laughter. The other young men born out of wedlock who were crowding around him also mocked and ridiculed her. They didn't dare provoke the other legitimate children too much. Beyond Wuxia was, after all, not a member of the Li family by blood. She was only betrothed to someone from the family, and the marriage hadn't even taken place yet. Besides, that someone in the family was already known as a useless person within the Divine General Mansion, and any one of them would surpass him in the future. That's why they naturally disliked the one sitting on a treasure round, enjoying endless resources and affection. Didn't Bai beat you yesterday? Haven't you learned your lesson? Want to stand up for that piece of trash? If you've got the guts, tell him to come himself. Bai doesn't even need to lift a finger. I could take that trash with both hands tied. Bai already showed you mercy yesterday, and you still don't appreciate it. You do have talent, but Bai has been training here for 8 years. If you want revenge, you might stand a chance in half a year, but by then, Bai will probably no longer be here. Beyond Wuxia bit her lip, but continued to stare earnestly at the young man in the middle. Do you dare or not? Her words instantly fired up the young man's blood, Qi. The young man called Bai, formerly known as Li Dongbai, was one of the 3 most talented among the illegitimate children at the training ground, with a 7th grade battle body. Enjoying resources close to those of the legitimate children, he already stepped into the Dotian realm. However, the martial training ground's regulation for skill competition required that the strong party suppress their cultivation level to the same realm as the weaker party. And Beyond Wuxia's current cultivation level, we're at the 10th level of perfection in the power passage realm. Today, I'll make sure you lose clearly and unmistakably. Li Dongbai's eyes were cold. He hadn't planned on provoking this girl with exceptional talent. He was simply chatting with his companions about something, and upon mentioning a trash in passing, he expressed a few opinions and had somehow been sought out by this girl. Although an illegitimate son, he too had pride and obviously wouldn't apologize. Thus the competition yesterday. Come on. Li Dongbai took his position on the stage in the martial training ground. Soon, the area around the stage was crowded with people, all eager to see the sparring between these 2 illegitimate young prodigies and that extraordinary talented girl. On the outside of the arena, the martial training ground's instructor, that old military veteran, squinted his eyes and smiled, encouraging the spirited competition among these young folks. A good sword is forged from constant sharpening. Without struggles during their youth, how can they experience setbacks? How can they progress? They certainly can't wait until they are his age, an old bag of bones, to start fighting for their lives. Soon, 2 figures, one large and one small, were locked in intense combat within the arena. The same scene had been witnessed by the old military veteran just the day before, and today's difference was not significant, except that Li Dongbai was striking with a few more degrees of ferocity. It seems that Shuai is going to lose again, thought the old military veteran. After all, her training is too short. Though she has exceptional talent, she still needs tempering. Just then, inside the arena, the figures crisscrossed, and the fiercest sword technique was executed. With a zooming sound, a sword flew out, tumbling to lay outside the platform, where it was skewered in sand. The figures on the platform were also frozen in place, frozen with them were cheering and jeering voices from below the platform. And also, the smile on the face of the old military veteran. Beyond Wuxia won. With a single stroke, she sent Li Dongbai's sword flying, while simultaneously thrusting her own blade to halt just half an inch from her opponent's throat. The young man was so shocked that he stiffened. When he finally collected himself, he quickly retreated several steps, staring at the girl fearfully. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. They stared at Beyond Wuxia, incredulous. Li Dongbai, after 8 years of cultivation here, had been defeated by a little girl who had only cultivated for 1 year. Was this the disparity of talent? Beyond Wuxia withdrew her sword, her young face blooming with a radiant smile she had won. She then looked up at the boy before her and said earnestly, I want you to apologize to Brother Hao. Please Apologize? To that useless guy? Li Hao came back to his senses, his face instantly flushing with shame. He gritted his teeth and said, I admit that I lost you, but I will not apologize. You, Yan Rushe furrowed her brows, unsure of what to do. She thought for a moment and said, if you won't apologize, I'll just have to be with you again. Childish. Anger, Li Donglai turned and ran off the platform. Sensing the gazes of others, he said nothing and ran straight out of the practice arena. The veteran in the army didn't stop the youth's departure. Some lessons needed to be learned on one's own after a setback. Instead, it was the little girl who drew his admiration. The finesse of her swordplay was already very close to perfection. This was no ordinary swordsmanship, it was of a high grade and quite difficult to master. The 9-tiered battle physique bestowed only the speed of cultivation, not the speed of technique mastery, which highlighted Bian Ruche's sword talent as rare and exceptional, just like her cultivation aptitude. Did she really tap into her potential just because of a small defeat yesterday? The veteran couldn't help but chuckle to himself. In the arena, the children of lesser branches watched the girl's figure with complex expressions in their eyes. They not only witnessed the young guy's proud defeat, but also recognized the disparity between themselves, children of the lesser branches, and those from the major courtyard. Sure, you're amazing. Several small figures ran towards Bian Rusho as she stepped off the platform, 2 siblings from 5th courtyard and Li Yuanjiao from 6th courtyard. They were the same age as Bian Rusho, with only a few months difference. The youngest was Li Yun's sister, Li Jining, who had just turned 6 this year and recently arrived at the practice arena. And their sister, Li Wushuang, had already left the manor cultivated with famous master. His brother Hao, who is amazing, Bian Rushu thought to herself. The 3 children gathered around Bian Rushu, chattering excitedly about the thrilling battle. Li Yun, Li Wushuang's brother, was the most exuberant. Sure, do you want some milk crisp cakes? Suddenly, Li Yun produced a wooden box, beautifully decorated on the outside, and gently opened it to reveal a fragrant, milky aroma wafting out, with soft, white as jade pastry inside. Here, have these. Bian Rushu leaned in and sniffed, enticed by pleasant aroma. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she happily asked, all for me? If you like them, take them all, Li Yun said with a wide grin. Thank you. Bian Rushu didn't forget to express her gratitude as she took the treats. The time had come to end the day's cultivation. She waved her hand and walked away with the lunchbox in one hand and her sword cradled in the other. Li Yun watched her departed figure, chuckling goofily. Next to him, his sister Li Jining looked up, her face etched with confusion. Brother, wasn't that prepared by mother for you? I haven't even tried it yet. If you want some, mother can make more for you later. Sure hasn't had any yet, Bian said nonchalantly with a silly smile. Li Jining huffed, pouting her cheeks and turned to leave with a hint of jealousy. Ning Ning, you can have mine, said the short, stout Li Yuanjiao, rushing over with a beaming smile. I don't want your hand-me-downs, the little girl retorted, slapping his offering away, still in a huff. In the pavilion, Li Hao's chess game was only halfway done when he heard Bian Rusho coming back. He glanced over idly and, seeing the unmistakable smile on the girl's face, he already knew the outcome and continued to focus on his move. What's got you so happy? Share it so I can be happy too. I won, said Bian Rushu as she dashed into the pavilion full of high spirits. She eagerly fixed her sparkling eyes on Li Hao as if waiting for praise for her achievements. Li Hao chuckled and placed another piece. As expected of Shuer, impressive. I? With that praise, the little girl's smile bloomed even more broadly. You go ahead and play, Brother Hao. I'll give you something delicious to eat in a bit, she said. Oh? Li Hao noticed the wooden box in her hand, but he asked no further question and continued his chess battle with Li Fu, quickly bringing a game to an end. Li Fu's chess skills were only average among amateurs, far from a professional level, which meant that whenever Li Hao played against him, he could only gain 1 or 2 points of experience. As a result, he couldn't help but ruefully think that the assassin had struck too soon. What's the good stuff? And Li Hao turned around carelessly and looked at the wooden box beside him. Bian Rushe put down her sword on the chair, carried the food box to the table, opened the lid, and a scent of milk wafted out. Someone gave me these milk cakes! They look really tasty! Brother Hao, would you like to try some? Who sent them? Li Hao didn't immediately take one, but asked with a sense of caution. Bian Rushe was taken aback, thought for a moment, then shook her head. I forgot to ask his name, but Brother Hao, you should know him. It's the one we often run into when we go to greet the head lady in the morning. Those kids? Li Hao was surprised. Li Fu gave him a look. I have to say, aren't you a kid yourself? But he long used to Li Hao's old-fashioned way of speaking. Uh-huh. Bian Rushu nodded. Li Hao felt a bit more at ease. You girl, you've been training in the martial arts field with him for a year already. How could you not remember their names? Bian Rushu looked at him with a hint of brilliance. They never told me their names. They definitely have, and even if they hadn't, the attendants around them would mention it. It's just that you haven't been paying attention, Li Hao remarked, annoyed. Then I will ask again next time, Bian Rushu said with a sullen face. You should be more sociable or you'll get bullied in the future, Li Hao advised her. Nonsense. Bian Rushu immediately raised her head, her face showing a hint of pride. Teacher said I have great talent and will become very strong in the future. Then I'll protect Brother Hao and I won't let anyone bully you again. Just take good care of yourself. I haven't been bullied, Li Hao replied, considering that his own daily life in the courtyard, chess playing and strolling, was too comfortable, almost like he had retired early. Boy, Shuer is offering this with all her heart. What's with your attitude? Li Fu couldn't stand it and scolded. Li Hao looked at him helplessly. The guy wasn't that old, in his 40s. He acted like an old traditionalist, not bothering to argue. Li Hao turned to him and said, Fu, you try it first. Test for poison. Although those kids aren't bad people, I'm worried they could be used by someone else. Li Fu nodded slightly, then took another look at Li Hao. This youngster always gave off mixed feelings. Sometimes he was meticulous, at other times he seemed clueless. After taking a bite of the fragrant cake, Li Fu then closed his eyes. A moment later, as Li Hao was getting impatient, he asked, How is it? There shouldn't be an issue, right? Say something, Fu. It tastes good, Li Fu opened his eyes and said. Li Hao rolled his eyes at him and immediately told Bian Rushu, "Hurry up and eat before it gets cold." He also picked up a piece and started tasting it. It did taste good indeed, and he said, "It's somewhat like Fifth Lady's craftsmanship." After taking a bite of the fragrant cake, Li Fu then closed his eyes. A moment later, as Li Hao was getting impatient, he asked, "How is it? There shouldn't be an issue, right? Say something, Fu." "It tastes good." Li Fu opened his eyes and said. Li Hao rolled his eyes at him and immediately told Bian Rushu, "Hurry up and eat before it gets cold." He also picked up a piece and started tasting it. It did taste good indeed, and he said, was it Li Yun who sent you this, or his sister Li Jining?" "It was Brother Yun." Bian Rushu could still distinguish between brother and sister. "Next time tell that kid to bring more. This little amount, who's it enough for?" Li Hao devoured his half rapidly but left the other half for Bian Rushu. Bian Rushu nodded, registering it in her mind. Li Fu shook his head discreetly on the side. At such a young age, why did this boy have such an air of shamelessness about him, which was quite distinct from the solemn and respectful style of the Li family manner? Somewhat like Fifth Lady's craftsmanship. Several days later, the Divine General Mansion suddenly welcomed a distinguished guest. There was a bit of commotion inside the mansion, and the ladies of each court, upon receiving the news, hurried to visit, learning that the guest was none other than that person from the Sword Saint. If they could establish some connection and have their children become his disciples, their future would surely be remarkable. Among them, the concubines were especially active. Their children's training resources couldn't compare with those of the legitimate family, so a lot of the best opportunities had to be fought for on their own. He, Jianlan, entertaining the guest in Eternal Spring Court, felt the frequent flitting of figures outside and understood their motives. She wasn't blaming anyone, but when she heard what the rumored Sword Saint said, her face showed a touch of surprise. After talking for a while, he, Jianlan, nodded slightly, stood up, and accompanied the guest to see them off. Soon after, Mountain and River Courtyard welcomed its long-lost liveliness as a big group of figures approached. Li Hao, playing chess in the pavilion and hearing the disturbance, was puzzled and then saw the leading head lady with a long, white-haired old man beside her. The old man had sharp eyebrows and prominent cheekbones, giving off a very robust and lean impression. Next to this unfamiliar old man was another elder, one from the martial training ground that Li Hao had seen several times and was fairly familiar with. "What's going on?" Li Hao didn't understand the situation. Li Fu, sitting opposite him, saw the white-haired elder and his pupils shrank in shock. Then he stood up quickly. As he felt astonished, he suddenly thought of something and became secretly excited. Li Hao seldom saw Fu so stirred up and realized immediately that this unfamiliar elder must be a very important figure. However, there weren't many who could make the Li family treat them with such regard. Looking at the unfinished game, Li Hao felt a bit reluctant, but had to set it aside for now and waited silently. Li Fu. He, Jianlan, saw Li Fu and immediately beckoned to him lightly, then called out to Li Hao. "Howard, come over here." Li Hao had to stand up and walk over. "Where's Yue?" he, Jianlan, asked again. Li Hao pointed to another part of the courtyard. "She's practicing her swordsmanship over there." "Shuejian, go call Shuer over." He, Jianlan, commanded a maid standing by her side. "Sword Saint Senior, this is the child of Tiangang, Li Hao." While the maid went to call Bian Rushu, he, Jianlan, introduced him to the white-haired elder beside her. Speaking of Howard's name, it was granted by Emperor Yu. "What do you think of this child?" When Emperor Yu was mentioned, the white-haired elder glanced at the woman and immediately understood her intentions, feeling slightly displeased. But he said nothing and began assessing the young boy before him. Li Hao was also looking up and sizing up the other party. When he heard the title the elderly lady used for the old man, he was somewhat surprised and understood why Fu's reaction had been so significant. Previously, while searching through chess manuals at Listening Rain Tower, he had also come across interesting stories and deeds of significant figures in Jianghu. In the records of Jianghu, figures from the past century, only 3 were known as Sword Saints. One resided in southern Sword Hut, one had retired in the Green Lakes amid the yellow sands of the North Desert, and another was like a dragon seen in head but not in tail. All 3 were masters of swordsmanship, startling the world with their swords, revered as Sword Saints. Which of the 3 Sword Saints was the strongest had been a perpetual topic of debate for enthusiasts over the past 100 years. His own third uncle, possessing extremely high talent in Sword Dao, had cleaved half of the Jianghu and Demon Forest of Jingzhou with a single sword stroke and yet had not been entitled as a sword saint, which spoke volumes of this old man's terrifying strength. He wondered, which one of the three was he? As their gazes met, Li Hao immediately saw in the old man's eyes a deeply hidden sword intent, profound as the sea and abyss. Yet this sword intent was concealed beneath dark and placid eyes, imperceptible unless one had a second-level understanding of the Sword Dao. I hear the child of Tiangang has failed in both foundation establishment and blood melting and lacks martial arts talent? Jian Wudao coolly looked down at the child before him. The Kailan children of the Divine General Mansion were regarded as extremely prestigious, second only to the imperial heirs, but to him, they were nothing significant, and there was no need to show deference to a mere child. Jianlan's face stiffened slightly as she nodded. Correct. Hence, I wanted to see Sword Saint Senior if this child has the talent for swordsmanship. If, in the future, he can engage in body cultivation and learn the sword, it would be his way of serving the nation and guarding a region for Daiyu. And at the mention of guarding, Jian Wudao's expression shifted slightly, softening a bit. Given his status, as long as the older generation of the Li family did not intervene, he did not need to concern himself with the thoughts of the younger generation. But the Li family's great achievements over thousands of years indeed commanded respect, especially in recent decades when occasional turmoil at the frontier pass saw 6 of the 9 sons of the Li family fallen in battle, a fact solemn enough to command profound respect. Let's observe together in a while, Jian Wudao calmly said. Jianlan was delighted, nodding her head. Soon, Bian Ruche was brought before everyone by Shuizhen, the little girl obviously nervous before the crowd of adults. She instinctively stood behind Li Hao, using him to shield half of her body. This scene was familiar to her. It had occurred during Li Hao's foundation, establishment, and bone measuring, only the expressions of those adults afterward had made her feel sad. Sword Saint Senior, this is the Sword Dao prodigy I mentioned to you on behalf of Bai Jing, said an elder from the military, moving forward with small steps and speaking respectfully as soon as Bian Rushu arrived. Jian Wudao nodded slightly. He had come mainly because his third disciple had tirelessly entreated him, talking about the maiden from the Divine General Mansion as if she were something miraculous. Having a fondness for talent, he had then descended from the Sword Cottage for a visit to this flourishing age. Power passage, realm level 10, perfection, robust skeletal structure, not bad. Jian Wudao identified the young girl's cultivation realm in a glance, his eyes showing satisfaction. Having heard she was a 9th grade battle physique, top tier talent, meaning she wouldn't need much worrying over in terms of future cultivation practices. Little girl, demonstrate your best swordsmanship for me, Jian Wudao said. Bian Rushu looked at the unfamiliar yet imposing elderly man, feeling nervous, and subconsciously glanced at Li Hao for reassurance. Understanding that it was Juer's opportunity, Li Hao immediately smiled and pushed her forward, saying, "Don't be afraid, don't be nervous, I'm right here." Encouraged by Li Hao, Bian Rushu's timidity dissipated quite a bit, and she nodded. The little girl then walked to the side, and without needing He Jianlan to signal, the rest naturally made way for the young girl. Quickly, Bian Rushu's swordsmanship swept out, like snow cascading down. Her posture as graceful as a startled swan, with a mastery and agility in her movements that carried an essence of returning to simplicity and truth. This essence was immediately captured by Jian Wudao, who had been immersed in the Sword Dao for nearly 100 years. The old man's sharp, elongated eyes like sword blades suddenly widened, revealing an unmistakable thrill of excitement. This was more than mere talent in the Sword Dao. It was the rare genius of the Sword Dao that one might see once in a century. At this age, to have cultivated a superior sword technique to perfection was already enough to match his most outstanding disciple, not to mention that there was now a hint of ultimate refinement. What an exceptional sword training prodigy! Jian Wudao couldn't help but burst into laughter, the hearty sound causing the dry leaves on the nearby trees to tremble and fall. Worth it. So worth it. The trip to the mortal world had not been in vain. The people around, hearing the Sword Saint's resonant laughter, immediately knew that the girl's destiny had soared from that moment on. Although already highly esteemed in the Divine General Mansion, praised by the world, it was really meeting a master like the Sword Saint that she truly climbed to the peak. with a future promising to make her a household name celebrated for generations. In an instant, countless complex gazes in the courtyard converged on the young girl holding the sword. Bianru Shue stopped her sword movements, feeling the intense gaze focused on her, and looked nervously towards Li Hao. Li Hao gave her a toothy smile and gave a thumbs up. Bianru Shu understood the gesture was praise for doing a great job. Thus, the young girl also relaxed and smiled broadly. "You've recommended well, very well indeed." The previously serious-faced Jian Wudao, now radiating a commanding aura, laughed heartily, slapping the shoulder of an old military man beside him. If it weren't for his connection with his third disciple, who highly recommended her, he wouldn't have stumbled upon such an exceptional sword talent. The senior flatters us. "It's sure's fortune to be apprenticed under the sword saint," the old military man said, visibly moved. The two appeared similar in appearance, both looking like men in their 60s, but in reality, the differences in their ages and statuses were extraordinarily vast. Jian Wudao smiled. In excellent spirits, he walked over to the young girl, bent down, and in a pleasant tone said, "Young lady, you like the sword, right? How about I take you on a journey to train?" Bian Rushe was slightly stunned and asked, "Where to?" "Sword Cottage." Jian Wudao, smiling, revealed this holy land coveted by swordsmen all over the world, saying, "I will teach you swordsmanship there, the best there is." Bian Rushu, not understanding, simply asked, "Is it far?" About 9,000 miles to the south, which for you is quite far," Jian Wudao said with a smile. Bian Rushe immediately looked toward Li Hao, not far away, and said, "Brother Hao, are you going too?" Jian Wudao then realized that he had forgotten another child. He, Jianlan, timely approached, quietly smiling. "Sword Saint Senior, you have yet to witness Haoer's talent in the sword Dao. It's said he also possesses an innate sensibility for it." "Yes, Senior," Li Fu added excitedly, sensing an opportunity. "When Shuer practices her swordsmanship, the young master often watches on the side, even giving her some solid advice. Though he hasn't trained formally, he seems to have his own understanding and talent for the sword Dao." Jian Wudao was somewhat surprised. Glancing at Li Hao, his brow slightly furrowed. But out of respect for He Jianlan nearby, he immediately said, "All right, give him a sword. Let him demonstrate whatever sword move he wants." End quote. "Thank you, Sword Saint Senior." Li Fu was overjoyed, thanking him profusely, then turned to Bian Rushue. "Miss Shuer, please lend your sword to the young master for a moment." Bian Rushu obediently nodded, handing the sword over to Li Hao.